This is Daniel Nasir Mirza, and here are the 3 things you need to know before UFC 246 emanating live from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's McGregor versus Cowboy. Firstly, we have to understand the relevance of the fight. Conor McGregor and Cowboy Cerrone are 2 of the best fighters to have ever graced the octagon. The disrespect shown by the media towards a has-been Conor McGregor and a Cerrone who's on his way out, quote unquote, is absolutely horrendous. We have to understand that these are fighters who are perhaps some of the best of this generation, if not all time. McGregor first captured the interim championship from Chad Mendes in 2015. In the same year, he went on to beat Jose Aldo, who, just by the way, reigned supreme as the featherweight champion of the world for 11 goddamn years. So 11 years unbeaten, the only featherweight champion up till McGregor knocked him out in 13 seconds, and the media now is telling me that McGregor's a has-been. More than that, McGregor went on in 2016 to have some of the best fights in UFC history, well, the second one at least, against Nate Diaz. He then went on to put on perhaps the best clinical performance in a UFC title fight ever, when he completely decimated Eddie Alvarez, made him look like a joke, didn't even make him look like a champion. He then went on to have the money fight, and then after that, of course, we know what happened with Khabib. These are the only last 2 appearances, and he's lost both of them. So whereas we can understand the argument, and you can make the argument that McGregor hasn't really been on top form as of the last 2 fights, those are just 2 fights. He's still Conor McGregor. He's still the guy who set attendance records. He set records with regards to being the first ever double champ. He set all kinds of records. So there's no way that McGregor's out of here. This fight is still very relevant for Conor. You can say he's perhaps missed a step in the last few fights, but this is his comeback. This is why this fight is just so important for McGregor. But the fact still remains, and those people are correct, that McGregor hasn't had a win since 2016, which is why this fight is so important for McGregor to now in 2020 get back in the win column in what he promises to be impressive fashion. Donald Cerrone is one of the greatest fighters to have never held a UFC championship. Now that Jorge Masvidal has made the BMF title really cool, Cerrone was one of those guys way before Masvidal who made it a point to prove that you don't need to win a championship in order to be considered one of the greatest of all time. Cerrone holds all of the numbers for most appearances, most wins, and even most knockdowns in UFC history. He's been fighting forever. He has 51 combined fights in his record with 36 wins, 13 losses, and 1 no contest. He's 36 years old. Now, whereas these are impressive stats from a legacy perspective, from an actual fight perspective, it's kind of important to realize that this kind of trend shows that a fighter is on his way out or that he's headed towards some kind of retirement or some kind of break. I don't think that's the case though. The relevance of this fight is again there in the fact that Cerrone's found his mojo again. Cerrone is now Dad Cerrone. It's almost as if it's mythical legend come true. Ever since he's had Danger, his kid, Cerrone's turned into a completely different fighter. So this Cerrone versus this McGregor is actually way more important of a fight than the media is giving it credit. It's Conor on his comeback, it's Cerrone on his up and coming. This is exactly the kind of fight that we need for both of these guys. Alright, the second thing we need to look into are the invariables. By invariables, I simply mean things that can't be accounted for, aren't documented, aren't obvious if you do a simple Google search, right? The first thing, if you look at all of the media runs, if you look at all of the interviews, if you look at the Mac Life, no matter where you go for your news source of information, if you see some kind of a direct quote from Conor, his coach, or anybody at his camp, all you can hear from them is that this is the best Conor's ever looked. Now, it's almost as if they're all being paid to say this, and I'm not trying to make that accusation. I'm just trying to say that they're all so in unison with this kind of a narrative that Conor is the best he's ever looked. Don't get me wrong, I still think he's the best he's ever looked as well. But that's something that still needs to be proven to be true, of course, and we'll find out this Saturday. But that's one invariable that we need to take into account. The Khabib fight, nobody really said much going into it because Conor already did all of the talking and all of the promoting. This fight is about his comeback, and all we know by now, according to Dana, is that the doctors are saying he's the best he's ever looked. John Kavanagh said that he's the best he's ever looked. His boxing coach from the Crumlin Boxing Club when he was a kid says he's the best he's ever looked. My aunt told me that this is the best he's ever looked. Omar Fussy, and he doesn't even watch MMA, told me this is the best Conor's looked. So apparently, this could be the best Conor's ever looked. Apart from that, what do we know about Conor? We know that Conor's a pressure player. We know he's brightest or shines brightest under the brightest lights, right? We know that Conor shows up and shuts people up. We know that he sells out arenas and he has no problem with it. He can stand in front of millions and millions of people, throw dollies, punch heads, kick heads, do whatever the hell he wants to do, and he'll be all right. But what do you know about Cerrone, right? And I'm not trying to sell Cerrone short here. Cerrone's had a legacy career. He's had one of those careers which we'll look at and say this was one of the best to have ever done it. But here's two things we know about Cerrone, right? The first thing we know about Cerrone when it comes to intangibles or invariables is that Cerrone sometimes kind of always cracks under pressure, right? Here's some examples. The RDA fight for the lightweight championship of the world, cracked. The Diaz fight, that was a big fight, cracked. The Benson Henderson fight for the lightweight championship, for his first crack at the UFC gold, if I'm not wrong, also cracked under pressure. Cerrone doesn't always take too kindly to the bright lights. Even relatively bigger fights, if you look at maybe Robbie Lawler, even though I still think that win went to Cerrone, he wasn't able to put him away or finish the fight and went to a split decision. Cerrone's had a lot of fights, he's had a lot of wins, but the ones that seem to matter the most, Cerrone loses. What else do we know about good old Donald Cowboy Cerrone, right? We know that he, according to his own volition, I'm not saying this, he's saying this, Cerrone is one of those guys that if you get him angry, he's gonna start to lose it. He's starting to start losing the game plan, starting to lose control. This is something that's happened over time and there's good trends of it. The best example, Nate Diaz Cowboy Cerrone. Flips his head off, shoves him, and there you go. You got a brawl, and when it's a brawl, Cerrone tends to lose, right? This is a pattern that we've noticed. Is this pattern fixed over time? And this could be said the same about big fights, right? His big comeback against Alexander Hernandez, or his move down to 155, he's done well. Some guys tried to piss him off, even like Mike Perry, even though that was 170. He did well. He finished both of those guys, right? So it still is something that we need to see, whether the bright lights and whether Conor McGregor's trash talk's actually going to get to Donald Cerrone. But if we're looking at a fight, we're looking at two guys who are playing at their strengths, or at least the best that they've been in a while, not counting the fact that Cerrone just got absolutely manhandled by one Tony Ferguson. And you know what you can do about that? Absolutely nothing. Tony Ferguson's untouchable, but that's beside the point. The third talking point is the fact that this fight is at 170 pounds. If you look at any of the media journalists, they're going to say that this is the most important talking point. I don't think so. Here's why. Conor's fought at 170 before. He's had two fights at 170. Both of them against Nate Diaz. He lost the first one. That was super embarrassing and shouldn't have happened. The second one, however, was a rematch which lasted 5 rounds. Conor was able to not just drop him, but last those 5 rounds, albeit he looked really beat up afterwards, but nonetheless lasted those 5 rounds. What is Conor getting if he's moving up to 170? He's getting some kind of a power gain, right? Although there's two kind of arguments that can be made. If he's a featherweight fighting against other featherweights, if he cuts down to 145 and retains that punching power, if he rehydrates properly and cuts properly, then he's probably has better punching power. But the other argument is when you're moving up to 170, you might not have that much punching power because you're going up against big boys at 170. Cerrone's not a big boy at 170. Cerrone's also fought at 155 and has gone up to 170, just like Conor max. The most Cerrone has on him is more fights at 170, right? But here's what we need to understand. Conor going up to 170, and not just going up to 170, but looking like Jack City, ladies and gentlemen, at 170, looking the biggest he's ever looked before a fight in terms of his size, means that he's trying to probably go for that power differential. Looking at some of his training, looking at how he's punching that heavy bag, probably might want to go for the knockout win. It's McGregor's best bet. But what is he giving up by bulking up so much? He's giving up his gas tank, simply put. He's giving up the chance of him winning the more the fight goes on. So whereas the journalists are saying that Cerrone has more ways to win, I agree with them, but I don't think he needs more ways to win. I think it's more likely for McGregor to get that knockout victory. And here's why I'm not necessarily discrediting Cowboy's work at 170 pounds. In Feb 2016, Cerrone moved up a weight class from 155 to 170 after he wasn't able to dethrone the lightweight champion of the world at that time, Rafael dos Anjos. Since then, Cerrone's gone 6-4 at welterweight. Now, that's 10 fights. That's a lot. And that's a lot more than, literally 5 times more the fights, if my maths isn't that horrible, than Conor's had, right? But now I want to look at the kind of guys that Cerrone's fought versus the kind of guys that he's beat, and the guys he's lost to, right? Cerrone's won fights over Mike Perry, Yancy Medeiros, Matt Brown, Rick Story, Patrick Cote, and Alex Oliveira. These are all good names. These are high-level caliber athletes, but now compare them to the names I'm about to tell you right now. He's lost to Leon Edwards, who is probably going to be a very, very good contender for the welterweight title in the next 2 years. Darren Till, who at that time beat Cerrone and then went on to fight for the welterweight title and just got a big win over Kelvin Gastelum at middleweight. Robbie Lawler, who is also one of the best storied careers in the UFC's history and perhaps the most violent and one of the most famous faces that have been seen in UFC. And of course, who can forget game bred BMF himself, Jorge Masvidal. So I'm not trying to discredit Cerrone's run at welterweight. I'm not trying to say that it's not impressive. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still watching till this point, anything can happen in a fight at any time. It is ridiculous to try to predict the fight game. But all I'm saying is that these are the three things, these are the three talking points that are important. All of them are pointing towards one thing, which is McGregor coming back. But I'll be damned. If I haven't been surprised before, I definitely will be surprised again. All that matters is I'm excited for this fight. I hope you guys are excited for this fight. It is this Saturday. If you're in Pakistan, which you probably are, you gotta wake up way early at 4 or 5 a.m. just to get the prelims and then 8 a.m. for the main card. Who gives a shit? We're fight fans. We love this. Stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. Keep it tight. He was one of the first guys. Oh man, I like this. I feel like I'm Christian Bale on set. You know what I mean? God damn, are you an amateur? तूने सुना था? वही वाली फील आ रही है. किसी को नहीं अपने like वो तब क्या था ना सेट पे मैं भी अपने आप पे तप रहा हूँ क्या हो गया? You walking out of the background? I'm sorry, Christian. Shut the fuck. यार वो कमाल बनता है.